So in terms of introductions, our first speaker, and I trust you, I was actually teaching a little earlier, so I wasn't able to be here for the awards and the recognition, but my understanding is full introductions have already been given to honor our speakers, of whom we have two. So I'll keep my remarks here very short because they need no additional introductions from me. Really, their honor has long been earned, as Pericles might say, by their deeds. And so I'll just introduce them briefly. Our first speaker, of course, is Dr. Carolyn Buxton Bridges, class of '87. Dr. Bridges, as you know, has dedicated her life to medicine and public health, spending over 20 years with the Center for Disease Control, working on global diseases, including the Zika virus, H1N1 pandemic, avian influenza, cholera, Ebola virus. Virtually all of these diseases are with us still, so it's fair to say that her work has not been entirely successful. Am I wrong? Fair? By job security. That's a compliment I seldom receive. By extension, in a manner of speaking, her failure to solve these intractable problems of infectious disease may even be considered to be to blame for our current pandemic, because if you had done your job better, we wouldn't even be in this situation. Her work at the CDC's for vaccine effectiveness, implementation, and pandemic preparedness has likely had a direct impact on our country's handling of COVID-19 so far. So once again, I'm enjoying myself far too much in this introduction. So let me just say, welcome, please, Dr. Buxton Bridges. Thank you.
Hey, with that introduction, it really does feel like home. That's exactly how it is at home. So I'm just gonna actually share a couple stories with you. So Dr. Robeson said, well, maybe you just want to talk about the day in the life of a medical epidemiologist or a epidemic intelligence service officer, because it's not a very common job. So as Sherry mentioned, I decided to work in influenza because I had some really tough experiences with patients and a couple really bad flu seasons when I was in practice of flu. And then I found out, gosh, my patients didn't want to get a flu vaccine. I put posters in my office. I made recommendations. Get your flu vaccine. I failed again, to your point. And so I started getting the morbidity and mortality weekly report. Who else gets the morbidity and mortality? It's a great, great journal, and everybody should read it. It's a page turner. But I just loved the outbreak investigations in there. It's like these little mini novels every single week. And so that's when I decided, public health was going to be my thing. That is going to be my thing. And as soon as I walked onto that CDC campus, I knew that was the place for me, and I really, really loved my job. But I didn't really know very much. So this seems to be a pattern with me. I get into these jobs that I'm really very unqualified for and fail at. But then you get an award anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So one of the very first projects I had was we got called by Ford Motor Company. And they said, hey, we're really thinking, GM does this, these guys do this. Should we be having a flu vaccine program for our workers? Is it worth it? Remember, this is a long time ago now. And we said, gosh, we'd really like to study that. Would you mind? And so what we did is we set up a randomized placebo-controlled trial of licensed flu vaccine with their salaried workers. The hourly workers were not interested in being in a randomized controlled trial. And this was actually the first vaccine study that I ever did. And the first year of that study, we started getting going, and the very first case of bird flu, of H5N1, happened in Hong Kong. And I was the EIS officer in influenza, so I wanted to go. I mean, why do you join CDC if you don't get to travel and go to some cool spots? And my dad had given me two choices at the time. He said, Carolyn, if you want to travel, you either need to join the Navy or find another job that will do that for you. So I went with CDC. There was my opportunity to travel. And they said, no, you need to stay in Detroit. And so instead of getting to go to Hong Kong, I stayed in Detroit for a couple of months. Sadly, or if you're an EIS officer eager to do some very cool stuff, there was another case a few months later, actually. So by then, that was around Thanksgiving. And so by the time that I heard about it, the World Health Organization was involved, because that's a really bad thing if you get a bird flu that spreads easily. So my boss and I got on an airplane like 2 days later. We left. There were 3 cases. We landed. There were 7. And we were met by all of these, the press people were all over it. This was a big deal in Hong Kong. And the director of the health department was Margaret Chan, who later became the head of the World Health Organization. She's a very impressive person. And we got there, and I ended up spending Thanksgiving and Christmas, and learned a lot of interesting things, like one really good way to spread bird flu to people is, when you make Peking duck, you chop off the head of the chicken, and then you put your finger around the neck, you separate the skin from the meat, and then you blow in it. And it turns out that was a really, really good way for people to get bird flu from sick chickens. I mean, I learned a lot of cultural things like that. So around Christmas, there was a picture in the Boise newspaper, in the Statesman, of me and a couple of other people, not identified, but we were working over Christmas, and we were drawing blood from some kids in a daycare because they had had a couple cases. So we want to know, well, how easily is this spreading? What percentage of the kids got infected from this other child who'd been there for a few days while sick? And so picture was in the paper. It just says, CDC people working over Christmas or something like that. And so a bunch of people called the Statesman, and they said, oh, she's from Boise. And so I got this call in the middle of the night in Hong Kong, and they said, we just would like to know if we can have a quote from you about this. Well, CDC rules are that you don't speak. It's the local people. They take the calls. They want to talk to press people. Then they call headquarters. They call Atlanta. I said, I'm really sorry. I can't really say anything right now, but you can call CDC. And they said, that's okay. Don't worry. I think we got everything we need from your mother. And I said, well, I think I've got some time. And so the line in the paper the next day was basically, former Capitol High School Golden Girl makes good. And for that dad, his daughter was a Golden Girl at Capitol, and he wanted to make sure that she recognized that there was a life after the Golden Girls. So, got to help somebody. So the lesson from there is I learned was to take the call. And then one other story. So I got back, and we did, besides having bird flu, it was the worst match between the vaccine and circulating viruses for flu that we had in forever. I didn't know. It was a terrible match. The vaccine did not work at all, 0. And so Ford was kind of mad. And so we begged him, come on, just let us, one more year. And so we did one more year of the study. Second year vaccine was 83% effective. We had a good one. And so I presented the first year results at a large public meeting saying that the vaccine didn't work because it didn't work. And I got roundly criticized by a vaccine manufacturer in public. And I said, well, I guess I'm going to present the negative results, because if we only present the things that are good, nobody will believe us. Next year, we had great results. We got them published or accepted to JAMA very quickly. But they said, we'll publish it, but we need you to redo all the analysis. Because they didn't like one thing that we had done. So we redid it, changed a couple, decimal points. And then I heard from someone else at CDC who said, we're going to stop you from publishing that. They threatened to pull the paper. And so we had meetings with the CDC director and others, because what they didn't like was how we said, some years it's not worth it. It's not cost effective to vaccinate healthy adults. And so what ended up happening is another part of CDC wrote an editorial that criticized our paper that was written by another part of CDC. And that's how we ended up resolving it. And they both ended up getting published, and everybody was happy. So that paper was the cost effectiveness of flu vaccine in healthy adults. And so CDC has a yearly, you submit papers for the best scientific paper of the year. And so our paper got nominated. And I told my co-authors who were in, at Ford Motor Company, I said, don't bother, don't come. It's not going to win. Trust me, this was a total show. And so they didn't come. And lo and behold, it won. And it really gave me a huge amount of confidence in the institution and to really respect the science. The results were the results. And they recognized that and recognized the paper. So I'll just end by saying, in my experience of 21 years at CDC, people do respect the science. We definitely have issues where we disagree on policy, but the people that work there are people that our kids were in Cub Scouts with, that lived in our neighborhood, that are also College of Idaho alumni kids. In fact, when I was there, at one time there were 4 College of Idaho alumni working at CDC. And you can have very, very good confidence that the results that you're seeing are the truth. And it's been a real privilege for me, an honor to get to work there. And I only could have done that if Sherry hadn't sneakily pushed me into applying to medical school and discovering public health and a career that I really was passionate about. So I want to thank my family for all of their support over the years. It's not easy having someone who does emergencies for a living, and I want to thank them for all of their support. My mom actually in H1N1 came and stayed with us for 3 months. I basically didn't see my kids awake for several months. I missed entire first grade year. But anyway, without their support and my kids, we would not have been able to do the kinds of things that we were able to do in the work that I did. So thanks.